My name is Riley Morgan, and for 34 years I was the outcast in a family that revolved around my younger sister, Charlotte. She was the golden child, elegant, cunning, the daughter my parents showcased to their affluent Chicago circle. I was the scapegoat, blamed for every flaw, ignored for every triumph. Our family had a tradition, a secretive annual ritual we called the Ledger, where we'd gather to manage what I thought was a quirky inheritance game. But when I uncovered its true nature, a scheme of tax evasion and fraud, I refused to stay silent, setting off a chain of events that exposed my family's lies, led me to fight for my best friend's daughter, Lily, and helped me build a new family from the wreckage of the one that never truly wanted me. The Ledger Ritual. I grew up in a sprawling brownstone in Chicago's Gold Coast, where marble floors and chandeliers screamed old money and control. My parents, Edward and Margaret, were pillars of their elite community. My father a hedge fund manager, my mother a patron of the arts who hosted lavish charity galas. They curated a perfect image, and Charlotte was their centerpiece. At 16, when I was 18, she was already a star, concert pianist, debate champion, with sleek auburn hair and a poise that captivated everyone. Her awards lined the mantel, her recital posters adorned the walls, and every dinner party revolved around her next performance. I was different. Genderqueer, with a cropped mohawk, vintage jackets, and a relentless curiosity that clashed with their polished aesthetic. I'd known since I was 12 that I didn't fit their binary mold, but when I came out at 16, my mother called it a distraction, and my father said, "Don't tarnish our name." "Why can't you be more like Charlotte?" my mother would snap when I skipped their events or questioned their values. I was never enough. Too loud, too odd, too me. The favoritism was suffocating. Charlotte got private music lessons, designer dresses, and trips to international competitions. I got secondhand laptops, endless chores, and lectures about embarrassing the family. If Charlotte missed a rehearsal, it was exhaustion. If I missed curfew, it was disrespect. She knew she was the favorite and wielded it like a blade. In private, she'd sneer, "You're just the family misfit, Riley." In front of our parents, she was all grace, and they'd dismiss her cruelty as sibling rivalry. It wasn't rivalry. It was a one-sided war. Our family's strangest tradition was the Ledger. Every December we'd gather in my father's study, a wood-paneled room that smelled of cigar smoke and leather, to review what I thought was an inheritance plan. My parents would open a locked safe, pull out a thick ledger, and discuss family assets with cryptic phrases like offshore accounts and trust allocations. Charlotte and I were expected to sit quietly, but she'd nod along, eager to inherit the family's wealth, while I fidgeted, bored and confused. They'd say it was about securing our future, and I never questioned it, until I did. High school was my escape. I joined the journalism club, wrote exposés on local corruption, and organized community forums. I wasn't Charlotte's kind of star, but I was driven. I won a National Journalism Award and earned a scholarship to Northwestern. When I told my parents, hoping for a spark of pride, my mother said, "That's nice, Riley, but Charlotte's performing at Lincoln Center. That's our focus." My father didn't look up from his ledger. I left for college with a notebook and a vow to uncover truths, no matter the cost. Uncovering truths. Northwestern was my liberation. I was Riley, not Charlotte's sibling, not the family disappointment. I majored in journalism, interned at a Chicago investigative outlet, and found a community that embraced my identity. I started therapy to unpack the PTSD and anxiety from my childhood, panic attacks triggered by my parents' rejection, nightmares of Charlotte's taunts. My therapist, Dr. Patel, helped me name the trauma: narcissistic parenting, scapegoating, emotional neglect. I graduated with honors and landed a job as an investigative journalist, exposing corporate fraud and political corruption. My apartment in Wicker Park was a cluttered space of notebooks and coffee mugs, but it was mine. Charlotte, meanwhile, had stumbled. After Juilliard, she joined a minor orchestra but quit after clashing with conductors. She moved back to Chicago, living off my parents' money while teaching piano part-time. They still worshipped her, paying her rent, buying her a Range Rover, and bragging about her artistic spirit. When I visited home, they'd talk endlessly about Charlotte's recitals, ignoring my stories that broke open city scandals. It hurt, but I'd built a life where their approval wasn't the goal. The ledger tradition continued, but it started to gnaw at me. At 31, during the annual gathering, I noticed discrepancies, numbers that didn't add up, references to Cayman trusts and unreported assets. My journalist instincts kicked in, but when I asked my father about it, he snapped, "Stay out of it, Riley." Charlotte smirked, saying, "You're always digging where you don't belong." I let it go, but the seed was planted. The secret came to light later that year, during a family gala at our brownstone. Charlotte was there with her husband, Ethan, a hedge fund analyst with a smug grin, and my best friend Sarah's daughter, Lily. Sarah, the only person who'd ever truly understood me, had died 3 years earlier in a boating accident. Her ex-husband, Mark, had custody of Lily, but he was unreliable, often dodging my texts. I'd tried to stay in Lily's life, sending books and calling when I could, but Mark made it difficult. At the gala, Charlotte was her usual dazzling self, charming the guests with stories of her piano students. But Lily was quiet, her green eyes fixed on her plate, her hands fidgeting with a locket Sarah had given her. I noticed a bruise on her neck, faint but unmistakable. When I asked her about it, she whispered, "I bumped into a door." Charlotte quickly changed the subject, but my journalist instincts screamed that something was wrong. The illegal truth. Later that night, I took Lily to the brownstone's rooftop garden, where the Chicago skyline glittered against the night sky. The air smelled of snow and city smoke, a Midwest winter mix. "Lily," I said gently, "is everything okay with Mark?" She hesitated, then whispered, "He's always drunk. Charlotte stays with us sometimes, says she's helping, but she just ignores me or yells." My heart stopped. Charlotte was involved with Lily's care? Why hadn't anyone told me? That night I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with questions about Lily and the ledger. I'd been investigating offshore accounts for a story, and the terms my parents used, Cayman trusts, unreported assets, sounded too familiar. I broke into my father's study, picking the lock on his safe, a skill I'd learned for a story on corporate espionage. Inside, I found the ledger. Pages of coded transactions, bank statements from the Cayman Islands, and notes about diverted funds. It wasn't an inheritance plan. It was a tax evasion scheme, funneling millions through shell companies to avoid IRS scrutiny. The ledger was our family tradition, and it was illegal. I confronted my parents the next morning in their dining room, a sleek space of glass and mahogany that smelled of coffee and pastries. My mother was arranging a fruit tray, her movements sharp, while my father read the Wall Street Journal. "The ledger is fraud," I said, holding up the documents. "You've been dodging taxes for years." My mother froze, her knife clattering. "You had no right to snoop," she hissed. My father slammed his paper down. "This is family business, Riley. You're betraying us." But I pressed, demanding to know why Charlotte was with Lily. They admitted Mark's alcoholism and Charlotte's role, funded by their trust money, but they hadn't told me because they thought I'd overreact. I was stunned. Not only was the ledger a crime, but they'd entrusted Lily to Charlotte, who was neglecting her to protect their image. The family tradition I'd grown up with wasn't quirky. It was felony, and it was tied to their golden child's ego. I refused to stay silent. I drove to Mark's apartment that afternoon, a rundown flat in Pilsen. The place reeked of stale beer, with pizza boxes piled in corners. Charlotte was there, scrolling through her phone, while Lily sat alone, clutching her locket. "What are you doing here, Riley?" Charlotte asked, her voice sharp. "Come to play detective again?" "I'm here for Lily," I said, my voice steady despite the rage. "This isn't okay, Charlotte. She's not safe here." She laughed, a cold, familiar sound. "You think you're better than me? You're not her parent." But I saw the fear in Lily's eyes, the way she held her locket like a lifeline. She wasn't safe, and neither was I, trapped in a family that hid crimes to protect its image. Taking a stand. That night, I called Child Protective Services, CPS, reporting suspected neglect. The caseworker, Aisha, interviewed Lily and confirmed my fears. Mark's drinking had escalated, and Charlotte was barely present, often leaving Lily alone or snapping at her to behave. CPS placed Lily in temporary foster care, and I filed for emergency custody. As a journalist, I'd exposed corruption, but this was personal. I knew the system's flaws: overworked caseworkers, biased courts, but I couldn't let Lily stay in that environment. I also contacted an IRS whistleblower hotline, anonymously submitting copies of the ledger's documents. The weight of betraying my family triggered panic attacks, but Dr. Patel helped me stay grounded. Charlotte was furious, calling me to scream, "You're trying to ruin us! Mom and Dad trusted me, not you!" Her words echoed my father's. "You're betraying us." But I was done being their scapegoat. I threw myself into the custody battle, using my investigative skills to build a case. I documented everything: photos of Mark's apartment, texts from Charlotte dismissing Lily's needs, medical reports noting her bruises. I was fighting for Lily, but also for the kid I'd been, the one nobody had protected. My parents took Charlotte's side, as always. They called me disloyal, accused me of destroying the family. "Charlotte's doing her best," my mother said. "You've always been jealous of her, Riley." My father cut me off financially, but I didn't care. Lily was my priority now. The courtroom and the IRS. The custody battle was grueling. Mark, backed by my parents' money, hired a high-priced lawyer who painted me as an unstable journalist with no parenting experience. Charlotte testified that she'd been selflessly caring for Lily, claiming I was motivated by spite. My parents took the stand, saying I'd always been rebellious and unstable, twisting my PTSD into evidence of unfitness. I fought back with evidence: photos of Mark's apartment, CPS reports, texts from Charlotte telling Lily to stop whining. I called character witnesses: my editor, who praised my integrity, my therapist, who testified to my recovery, and Sarah's sister, who confirmed Sarah would have wanted me to protect Lily. Most importantly, I had Lily's voice. In a closed session, she described Mark's rages and Charlotte's neglect, her voice small but clear. Her drawings, dark sketches of a house filled with yelling, broke my heart and swayed the judge. The turning point came when I uncovered Charlotte's financial ties to the ledger. Using my investigative contacts, I found bank records showing my parents had funneled money through Charlotte's accounts to hide it from the IRS. Her social media showed luxury vacations and designer bags, paid for with trust money meant for Lily. When I presented this in court, Charlotte's charm crumbled. She stammered, claiming it was family funds, but the judge wasn't convinced. Parallel to the custody battle, the IRS launched an investigation into my parents' finances, triggered by my whistleblower tip. Federal agents raided their brownstone, seizing the ledger and freezing their accounts. My parents were furious, calling me a traitor, but I stood my ground. The judge granted me temporary custody, with a plan for permanent guardianship if Mark and Charlotte didn't meet CPS requirements. Lily moved into my Wicker Park apartment, and for the first time, I saw her smile. A real, unguarded smile. Building a home. Life with Lily was a journey. I turned my spare room into a space for her, with bookshelves, a desk, and fairy lights. She was quiet at first, scared to trust, but we built a routine: school, therapy, journalism workshops. Lily loved writing, her stories filling notebooks with dreams of adventure. My PTSD flared, panic attacks at night, fears of failing her, but Dr. Patel helped me stay grounded. I kept my job, breaking stories on corporate greed. My colleagues became my support system, helping with Lily's school pickups when I was on deadline. Charlotte and Mark faded from our lives. Mark failed his sobriety tests, and Charlotte faced IRS scrutiny, her accounts frozen. My parents were indicted for tax evasion, their empire crumbling. They tried to guilt me into reconciling, but I set boundaries, refusing to let their toxicity back in. The long road to healing. Over the years, Lily thrived. She won school writing contests, her stories reflecting hope and resilience. We built traditions: Friday movie nights, Saturday walks along Lake Michigan, holiday baking sessions where flour ended up everywhere. One day she called me Riley, then paused and said, "You're my family." I hugged her tight, my heart full. My career soared. I won a Pulitzer for a series on financial fraud, inspired by the Ledger. I started a mentorship program for young journalists, sharing my story to inspire others. Listeners reached out, sharing their experiences surviving toxic families. My chosen family, friends, colleagues, Lily's teachers, became my anchor. My parents pleaded guilty, receiving probation and fines, but I kept my distance. Charlotte moved to New York, chasing another dream, and I let her go. A new legacy. At Lily's high school journalism fair, I watched her present a story on community resilience, her voice strong and clear. She dedicated it to me, saying, "Riley showed me how to tell the truth no matter what." I hugged her, tears in my eyes, knowing I'd given her the safety I'd never had. The family tradition I'd grown up with, the Ledger, wasn't just illegal. It was a lie that propped up Charlotte at the expense of everyone else. Uncovering it cost me my family, but it gave me Lily and a life I'd never dared to dream of. I'm Riley Morgan, journalist, guardian, survivor, and I've built a family that loves without secrets.